Session. So welcome everyone, and I'd like to present Ben Odry from Siemens Research. And Ben is going to tell us about the ACR-Siemens workstation project. It's a private, government-private partnership arrangement devoted to traumatic brain injury. So, Ben, the floor is yours.
Thank you. Interoperability, and we chose to address the issue of TBI. So I was asked to overview this project back in 2010, and it was a nice time to be in because things were moving. So the key players of this project are Tatric, the American College of Radiology with their platform Triad. So us, SCR, for image processing, and we have clinical partners. We have NICO, the National Intrepid Center of Excellence, and we have Scott & White as well in Texas. So why it was interesting, it was because at this time, so this standard for, this DICOM standard for application hosting was finally approved. So it's something that allows two applications, a host and a plugin, to communicate together and share images. So this morning we had talked about plugins within a framework. So this would allow us to have any application that you would build and plug it to any workstation from any vendor. So this is why it was really interesting. All right, so as I said, so the initial goal was to focus on interoperability. So that means easy deployment of those applications or prototype, regardless of the workstation and regardless of the vendor. At first, it was a working group, 23, that was dedicated to understand the issues that were needed at the time, and it was modeled as a draft called the Supplement 118, and it was validated back in 2010 as a DICOM standard, and it's called Part 19 now. So every application, should be DICOM Part 19 enabled, since it's a standard now. It's part of the whole guideline of DICOMs. So as I said, this is what we try to do, to have this interoperability, but dedicated to TBI. So the Part 19, what is this? So it was a concept championed by SCR. We have John Pearson is in the audience. What this idea of having a plugin that you could use on a host machine, and you have this glue here that you would have between the plugin and the host. You would work on your plugin, do your application, and then just plug it to your host. So you could do that for prototyping. You could do this also for the, clinical testing, for instance, or clinical operations. So the method doesn't change. You just have to have this glue and follow on throughout the whole process of the application. So this, the way to do this, so you have your application itself, your image processing application, and you have some kind of a glue, which is really simple to use. You have the standard Part 19 explain exactly what kind of communication you can have between the host and the plugin, and then you have this Part 19 glue, basically, or doors that basically gets the request from the host and translates to the plugin. So this is a really easy way to develop your prototype. And we talked about FitBeer. As I said, that they were looking at APIs to have applications in their image processing application in their whole framework. So if FitBeer is Part 19 compliant, they could just use this, and any of you guys, software developers, could actually have their application running on FitBeer. So to give more of a context, so we partner with ACR, and they have an application for clinical trials, which is called Triad. The idea is it's an application to accommodate image sharing between multiple institutions. So it's a DICOM Part 19 compliance. You have secure communications. You have roles that are defined for users, and you have customizable work lists to know exactly what kind of data you can actually submit and share. Based on the institution, you have specific sets of data, and you can access based on your role. This has an educational role, and this has been deployed over 500 sites. This is the ACR part. So a little bit more about how it works. So you have here the cloud, basically represented by this central server where you can have data, a repository for data and markups. So at the client level, so you have the Triad client, and you have your application or your plugin that is connected directly to the Triad via part 19. So in our case, we have a TBI viewer. You can have multiple sites that submit data. You can here have sites that review data sets, and everything is uploaded here and accessed from site 1 to site N, and so on and so forth. ACR also can have downloadable plugins to Triad. As I said, so Triad, so you submit data, you can anonymize data, you can attach specific files or non-DICOM files to your study. So if you have markups, you can attach to the study or to the series. If you have PowerPoint file, if you have report, anything you could attach to this. Of course, the data are anonymized. So this is what I talked about, user roles, to access the study, work list, and so on. So just to go through quickly exactly what's being done. So you have an interface for Triad. You can submit, choose series. You attach file to the series, as I said, so either DICOM or gradient file or a report. You can verify that the anonymization is done properly. Once the data is submitted locally in the client, you can open it with the viewer. So you select the series, you choose view, and you open it to the viewer. You can also select which of the non-DICOM files you want to pass to the plugin. And boom, you have your plugin that loads the image that were selected. So this is the part 19 Triad one. So with this framework, we decided to build a plugin dedicated to TBI. So our clinical partners were NICO at first in 2010, and then I think a year and a half ago, we partnered with Dr. Little from Scott & White now. So NICO is focused on multimodality and categorization of lesion, so using those common data elements that we talked about this morning. And at Scott & White, they're more focused on quality assurance and DTI analysis. So as I said, NICO, they have a huge amount of data. So primarily, as was said before by Mona, so they have all the veterans from Iraq and Afghanistan coming back with traumatic brain injury. So they go through Walter Reed and they get scans. So they get MR, they get CT, they get PET, and they have multiple sequences, SWI, DTI, and so on and so forth. So they have a 24-hour pipeline of pre-processing the data to skull stripping, getting rid of the registering, realigning the data, and so on. So this was our input. And what they wanted to have is this tool a practical tool to actually do this categorization of lesion. You mark the data, you save, then it gets downloaded to their own database so they can correlate with psychological evaluation of the patient, for instance. For Scott & White, it was more quality control, DTI, and across multiple institutions. That was what was interesting there. So for NICO, as I said, so our goal or our requirements were to build a practical categorization of lesion tool, and this would also help to improve the acquisition protocol, because between institutions you could potentially see whether with one specific acquisition you could see a lesion and a specific other protocol in another institution if you still could see the protocol. So that was one of the idea behind this. All right, so the ways that we're doing annotation first, so they had those sheets of paper, so they had to go through all the data sets, and for each of the, whenever they would see a lesion, so they would mark it down like this and go through all those papers and check the boxes, basically. So what we wanted to do was first to use those common data elements to have a way to see as many data as possible in those three orientations. Maybe realign the data if necessary. Use a protocol that would be standardized, so on top of the CDE, but use AIM, which is really the format that is a standard to save data and read data, and have some kind of quantification of lesion. So the workflow then would be centered around those three things. So the realignment, the reading process to mark, and the segmentation to have some kind of quantification of those lesions. On top of this, so you could have iterative data loading. So you would load first fMRI sequence, then PET, then CT. So you don't have to load everything at once to allow for more flexibility. You have nifty import, nifty export. Export the finding as aim, as I said. Export of registration matrices once you've done your processing, so that can be reused in another framework. So as I said, the first tab was the registration to realign. So you could select your reference data if you want a diffusion or structural or functional data as a reference. So you could select this. You have here basically all the data that are loaded, multimodalities that are loaded at the same time. So you could select those. Here we change, so we're just overlaying a T2 with fMRI. Once you do this, so here we have those 3 rows. So you have one full sequence here, another one, and another one. So you could just review 3 data sets in a row. If you want to add one, you just select a row and you click on the next one that you want. Here, if you have multiple T2, you would have a pop-up window and you can select your image. Once you have this, so you can mark down a lesion, so just for the sake of showing. So you have a lesion, you mark it once in one data, and then you can propagate the marker wherever you see the lesion elsewhere. And then comes the categorization of lesions. So after the marker is done, so you can get this pop-up window, and you just check the box directly. You can define or use an atlas to actually pre-fill those information. Then you have a code color saying that this lesion has been annotated. You see here what kind of annotation it was. You have the position. You see where it was propagated. You have where exactly the lesion is happening. So all of these markers are saved and passed down after that. Then you have common tools for segmentation. So it's semi-automated tools. You can either draw manually or put seed points using methods that we call the random walker inside and outside, and get a definition of a lesion out of this. So this was a basic tool for NICO to do annotation, get multiple modalities at once, and be able to do this kind of annotation. For Scott and White, the focus was more on quality assurance and DTI analysis, and also sharing all of the things between those institutions. So our first step is the quality assurance issue. So we would do time-slice correction, motion correction. So we talked about this morning, how important is this? So of course, because if we have to make sure that we're looking at the same lesion, the same voxel, the same position of the lesion. So we do this. So what happens after that? We get the displacement along those 3 axes. So the rotation and the translational displacement. So the user, can actually select the data if he thinks that there is too much rotation or too much translation, and exclude the data from further processing. Similarly, for the SNR, the user can place region of interest on the data. This is the case with fMRI. We have about 75 volumes there, and look at the average across time series. And whenever there is a drop here, the user can choose to exclude the specific volumes. So for all the volumes all the series with multiple time points, you could do this. So for fMRI, for DWI as well. So once this data is motion corrected and realigned, and the bad acquisition are removed, so we do a registration, so the same way we're doing it for NICO, and then you have a DTI analysis based on those corrected data sets. So here we provide, of course, a computation of the tensor. We have computation of the tracks based on the region of interest, statistics along the tracks. and also comparison with control. So here this is also multimodality. We have computed all the tensors. You would select a region, for instance, and get information about the tracks that goes through this region. Get eventually, some tracks. This is another case. Select a region, you get more tracks. But what's interesting about this, so you could do the same process of motion correction, realignment, excluding data, and for control, and save those things in a specific database of control. And when you get the data that actually has TBI, you could take either the average of those controls, average for T2, average for FA, average for all those tensor maps, and compare to your subject. And you could do this at the track level, at the voxel level, but compare the tracks also based on the region. So this, right, and those results, so I stored in an internal base. So you could use either the average of the control or get a specific controls to compare your subject to. So this is a map here of the difference, for instance. So here it's not done, but it wasn't done yet. This is a work in progress. But we could apply a specific lookup table for where you have an increase of FA, a decrease of FA, and monitor this over time using the same baseline to have an idea of how treatment is responding to the patient and how the patient is evolving over time. So yeah, so we can monitor the patient against himself and also against the normal at this point. So this is one tool that we tried to have practical for a study. It contains multiple things, so things that you find in different tools, but really specific to TBI. So we have a workflow that includes this quality assurance approach, analysis on both on structural, functional diffusion data sets. We build internally a database of control that can be used after that. And based on this database of control, we can assess the severity of TBI and the evolution of TBI. So where it shines, it's really the combination of this application being used with Triad. You can imagine NICO is a consortium of institutions. They have multiple institutions that can specify acquisition protocols for each of the institutions, and then they can share those data, these annotations that goes with the data, so radiologists can review from any other institution, add markups if needed, and ultimately all these images or annotations that we're getting can help build a statistical model of recognition of TBI. So I'm not talking about it here, but we also do research on trying to identify a TBI from control and mild TBI, and we use all this kind of information in addition to the behavior. So all of the things can also be passed down from an institution to Triad and be accessible from any institution connected to the same network. So the next steps for us, it's the deployment at Scott & White. We hope to do that next month. Start gathering data from them. So annotation of data, information about the behavior of the patient, so we can start building our model. We're going to have this at least at 2 institutions that partner with Scott & White. And what we can think of after that, it's have a control group in the cloud, so all of those institutions can share the same control group and have actual a meaningful comparison and work more on the monitoring. So I would just like to take a few moments to acknowledge those people that over those 3 years worked on this project, so people from SCR, from ACR, from Tatrick, from NICO, and from Scott & White. Thank you. If you have any questions, let me know.